Patricia Townsend, the authoritarian president of the HOA, went berserk when she saw children playing in the community pool after hours. Angry at not being obeyed, she made an insane decision. She threw acid in the water. Chaos ensued when the chemical smell took over the condominium and residents began to feel ill. Now she's trying to justify herself. But the security cameras recorded it all, and the police are already on their way. If there was a hell on earth, it was shaped exactly like the Oak Ridge Gardens condominium where Patricia reigned. She wasn't just the president of the HOA. She was the living version of a tyrant dressed in a beige sweatshirt and low heels. Her absolute power came from a notepad and a big pen, and she made a point of using them as if they were the Constitution of the United States. Her obsession was to maintain order in the condominium, but order in her crazy mind meant dictatorship. Crooked lawn chairs? Fine. Barking dog? Notice. Plant growing half a centimeter larger than allowed? Warning letter. And the great trophy of the crazy rules was the blessed communal swimming pool. According to her, the pool was a sacred place of respect and serenity. But the reality? It was just a square of tile filled with chlorine where residents wanted to cool off without being tormented. But not in her empire. The HOA had a 32-page code of conduct just for the pool. Specific hours, types of clothing allowed, acceptable decibel level of conversation. Even the speed at which a person could move in the water were regulated. Colonel Marcus Washington, the HOA vice president and a retired Marine, often stood by Patricia's side during her pool inspections. With his military precision haircut and perpetually erect posture, he cut an intimidating figure. The residents had nicknamed them the general and the dictator behind their backs. Unlike Patricia, who ruled through pure intimidation, Marcus was calculated and methodical, citing bylaws with the precision of someone reciting military coordinates. You know, Patty, Marcus said one evening as they completed their rounds, his voice low and measured. Some of the residents are saying your pool regulations are excessive. Patricia's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. Excessive? The rules exist for a reason. Marcus. Structure. Order. Safety. Marcus nodded slowly. Of course. Just thought you should know what I'm hearing. And that's when the chaos began. On a sunny weekend, the pool turned into an impromptu party. Children laughing. Adults drinking something cold, colorful floats everywhere. What should have been a normal summer's day became the neighborhood tyrant's biggest nightmare. As soon as she laid eyes on the scene, you could see the vein in her forehead pulsing. She came out of nowhere like a predator smelling prey. Her arms crossed, her nose twisted, her judgmental gaze sharp as a knife. Silence took over as the residents began to notice the sinister figure standing at the edge of the pool, staring at everything as if she were facing a heinous crime. Marcus stood a few paces behind her, clipboard in hand, his face unreadable as he surveyed the scene. The residents glanced nervously between the two of them, uncertain which was more dangerous, Patricia's explosive rage or Marcus's cold calculation. Without warning, Patricia grabbed the whistle hanging around her neck and blew so hard that a pigeon fell from the sky. The pool is closed. The panic was immediate. The children were paralyzed. The adults looked at each other confused. A guy in flowery shorts tried to argue, but she was already pulling out her little notebook of doom. The point was simple. The pool could only be used at predetermined times. And the big crime? The community was there exactly 15 minutes longer than allowed. They're disrespecting the condominium's rules. Fines for everyone. The parents huffed. The children began to protest. And that's when the resistance began. No one left. A braver resident, possibly spurred on by 3 cans of beer, shouted an audacious, "Fuck you, Patty." The whole condominium went into shock. Patricia pressed her lips together, looking at the man as if he had committed a federal crime. She remained motionless for a few seconds, eyes squinted, calculating her next move. Marcus stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on Patricia's arm. "Perhaps we should document the violations and address this at the next board meeting," he suggested, his voice carrying the weight of authority that made several residents visibly relax. Patricia shook off his hand. "They need to leave now." "Patty," Marcus lowered his voice, "there are children present. Let's not escalate this." For a moment, the two locked eyes in a silent power struggle that the entire pool area could feel. Then, without saying a word, Patricia turned on her heels and marched away. But not before letting out one last sentence. "It won't stay that way." And indeed it didn't. That night, Patricia spent hours locked in the HOA headquarters. What was she planning? A double fine? An emergency meeting? No. What was going through this crazy woman's head was much, much worse. She wanted revenge, and not just any revenge. It would be something chemical. Literally. Marcus, troubled by the pool confrontation, decided to check on Patricia. As he approached the HOA office, he noticed the lights still on despite the late hour. Through the window, he could see Patricia hunched over her computer, face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. Something about her expression made him hesitate. Instead of announcing his presence, he moved to the side of the window, watching. Night fell over the condominium, and while the residents slept soundly, satisfied that they had defeated the HOA's little dictator, she was awake. Sitting at her ridiculously large mahogany desk in the association's headquarters, her surroundings were gloomy, illuminated only by the cold light of the computer reflecting on her tense face. Her fingers drummed against the desk, her impeccably filed nails tapping in a methodical rhythm, as if she were devising an evil plan. And well, that's exactly what she was doing. It wasn't just about the rules. It was never just about that. It was about power, about absolute control, about making those ingrates respect her authority without contest. They had laughed at her, challenged her, mocked the rules she had imposed with such care and dedication. And what's worse, they'd said, "Fuck you, Patty." It couldn't go on like this. She scrolled down the computer screen, opening a search tab full of suspicious terms. Chemical substances for sanitizing swimming pools, strong chlorine where to buy, how to eliminate resistant bacteria in standing water, acid solution to eliminate algae quickly. If someone saw this search, they might think she was worried about cleaning the pool, but the reality was much worse. The goal wasn't purification. It was revenge. Outside, Marcus's military training kicked in. This wasn't just an HOA president being petty. This was someone planning something dangerous. He quietly took out his phone and began recording through the window, capturing Patricia's computer screen and her increasingly agitated movements. Patricia stood up, picked up her structure handbag, and walked out the door with determined steps. Her destination, a chemical store on the other side of town, far enough away that no one would suspect a thing. The store was the kind of place that didn't ask too many questions. A discreet little door with an old sign and an attendant who seemed bored with his own existence. As soon as she entered, the man barely looked up from his cell phone. "I need something strong," she said, her voice calculatingly calm. "Something that will kill any bacteria in a swimming pool. And fast." The attendant raised an eyebrow. "Something strong like?" She leaned a little on the counter, her eyes shining with a mixture of obsession and impatience. "Something that takes effect instantly, something that completely disinfects, that makes any dirt disappear." The guy shrugged and walked over to a locked shelf. He came back with a large bottle with a reddish label full of warnings that would make any sensible person recoil. "This is acid used for industrial cleaning, dissolving scale on surfaces and other things. Mixed in the right way, it can clean a swimming pool in minutes, but you have to know how to use it. Otherwise, it can be dangerous." She picked up the bottle, analyzing it with a calculating expression. "Perfect." Without blinking, she threw a large bill on the counter and left, holding the bag as if she were carrying a trophy. The plan was in motion. What Patricia didn't realize was that Marcus had followed her to the chemical store, staying a safe distance back. He watched the transaction through the store window, his military training making him virtually invisible in the shadows. When she emerged with the bottle, his concern deepened. He made a quick call. "Lisa, this is Marcus Washington. I think we have a situation developing at Oak Ridge Gardens. Patricia Townsend is planning something dangerous." Lisa Rodriguez, a resident who had once worked as an environmental safety inspector before retirement, listened carefully. "What kind of dangerous?" "The chemical kind. Can you meet me at your place in 20 minutes? And bring your test kit." The dawn was silent when Patricia arrived at the condominium pool. It was ridiculously easy to bypass security, not least because she was the security. She took the keys that only the HOA possessed and unlocked the gate, walking to the edge of the pale blue water. The moon reflected on the tranquil surface. So peaceful, so pristine. But in her mind, it was a battlefield. That pool had become the symbol of insubordination, and now it would pay the price for it. With disturbing calm, she opened the bottle of acid. The strong smell rose instantly, making her eyes water. "Goodbye, pool party," she muttered to herself. Then she leaned over and poured the liquid into the water. The effect was almost immediate. A thin smoke began to rise from the surface. An acrid smell invaded the air, something between strong chlorine and stale vinegar. She took a step back, watching her work with sick satisfaction. The next day, no one would dare disobey her again. The HOA empire would once again be feared. She locked the gate and disappeared into the night, leaving behind a swimming pool that in a few hours would become the chemical nightmare of the entire condominium. What Patricia didn't notice was Marcus standing in the shadows of the clubhouse, capturing the entire incident on his phone. As soon as she left, he approached the pool cautiously, the military-grade flashlight in his hand illuminating the now cloudy water. "My God," he whispered, immediately calling Lisa. "She actually did it. Get your equipment and meet me at the pool now. And call emergency services. We need to evacuate the buildings closest to the pool." The sun rose, and with it, the naivety of the residents of the condominium who still believed they were living in a minimally civilized place. Children woke up excited, already wearing their bathing suits. Parents grabbed their towels and thermal bags, ready for a relaxing day at the communal pool. Little did they know that they were about to enter a scenario worthy of a clandestine chemical laboratory experiment. The first victim of the disaster was Mrs. Peterson, a retired lady who had the unchanging routine of doing her morning laps in the pool as if she were training for a non-existent Olympics. She arrived early, unlocked the gate with her HOA membership key, and walked to the edge, taking a deep breath. Something was strange. The pool had always smelled faintly of chlorine, but that morning, the air was different, an acidic, suffocating mixture, as if someone had poured in a whole bottle of vinegar and bleach at the same time. Mrs. Peterson frowned, but being stubbornly faithful to her routine, decided to ignore the warning from her instincts. And so, she stepped into the water. The scream was immediate, a sound so high-pitched and desperate that it woke up half the condominium. The residents who were on their way to the pool stopped midway, confused, trying to understand what was happening, until the poor thing stumbled out of the water, her eyes wide, her skin as red as a boiled shrimp. She held on to the iron railing, gasping, while her skin burned as if she had been dunked in a vat of liquid pepper. "The water is burning," she shouted, her voice shaking with panic. At that moment, a father who was already fixing his children's floaties looked at the pool and finally realized the water didn't look normal. The usual crystal blue was different, a strange hue, a little cloudier, almost as if something was dissolving in there. Small bubbles were rising to the surface, and a fine mist hung in the air. It was enough to trigger chaos. The screams multiplied. Parents grabbed their children and ran away, and the whole condominium began to gather around, trying to understand what the hell was going on. Just then, Marcus burst through the pool gate. With Lisa Rodriguez at his side, she carried a large case with hazard symbols on it, her professional chemical testing kit. "Everyone stay back," Marcus ordered with the commanding voice that had once directed troops in combat zones. "This pool has been contaminated with industrial chemicals. We need to establish a safety perimeter now." While people were trying to help Mrs. Peterson, someone had the good sense to call the condo's janitor, who arrived in less than 10 minutes, still chewing on a piece of bread with jam. Clearly unprepared to deal with a swimming pool turning into a cauldron of acid in broad daylight. The man stopped at the edge of the pool, leaned over, and like any idiot who thinks he's smarter than everyone else, decided to stick a piece of the squeegee in the water to test what was going on. The plastic of the squeegee instantly turned white. He widened his eyes. "That's not normal chlorine." The mood changed instantly. Panic was replaced by something colder, more serious. Someone had done this on purpose. The question now was, who? And that's when attention turned to a certain woman who conveniently appeared on the scene with her typical disdainful expression, holding up her notification pad as if it were an FBI badge. Patricia looked at the commotion and pursed her lips, pretending to be surprised. "But what's going on here?" The look she received could pierce concrete. One of the residents, a guy who had clearly had enough of her antics, pointed an accusing finger. "What have you done with the pool?" She blinked theatrically, indignant. "Me? Why would I do something like that? It's absurd." But no one was buying that ridiculous act. It was obvious. Who else would have done it? The last few days had been a real battleground between her and the residents. She had gone berserk at the poolside, threatened everyone, left with an unsettling promise of revenge, and now the pool was looking like a pool of sulfuric acid. Coincidence? Not here, not in hell. She did it. Marcus's voice cut through the crowd as he stepped forward. I have video evidence. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered residents. Patricia's face went from indignant to shocked in an instant. Marcus? What are you talking about? He held up his phone. I saw you researching industrial chemicals last night. There was a moment of complete silence as the residents tried to process this betrayal within the HOA leadership. You've been watching me? Patricia's voice rose to a shriek. You had no right. I had every right, Marcus countered calmly. As vice president of this HOA, I have a duty to protect this community. When I saw you planning something dangerous, I acted accordingly. Lisa Rodriguez stepped forward, holding up a testing strip that had turned an alarming shade of purple. This pool water has a pH of approximately 1.5. That's equivalent to stomach acid. Anyone who entered this water could suffer severe chemical burns. The janitor looked at Patricia suspiciously. The only person with access to the keys apart from me is you. The woman raised her nose. Are you accusing me without proof? What an ugly thing to do. The residents began to mutter amongst themselves, and soon a crowd of angry people was surrounding Patricia. The patience of the entire condominium had run out. That's when someone came up with a brilliant idea: security cameras. The HOA, of course, had cameras on almost everything because Patricia loved being the neighborhood watch. Only now, for the first time, the cameras could be used against her. The residents rushed to the condominium's security room. The HOA itself had the monitoring system, so all they had to do was pull up the footage from the night before to find out who the criminal mastermind had been. And guess who appears on the recording? That's right, the supreme queen of paranoia, pouring suspicious liquid into the pool with the finesse of a mad scientist. The entire condominium watched in absolute silence. That was it, the definitive proof. The crime recorded in HD. I have additional footage on my phone, Marcus offered, holding it up. In case there was any doubt. All eyes turned to Patricia, and that's when the woman ran. That's it. She didn't even try to argue. She didn't even make an excuse. She simply turned on her heels and ran like she was running away from a mugging. What happened next? Well, the police were already on their way, and that race wasn't going to get her very far. Let her go, Marcus warned as some residents prepared to give chase. She's dangerous and unstable. Let the police handle this. But a young mother whose children had nearly entered the toxic pool wasn't having it. She could have killed our kids, she screamed, tears streaming down her face. I'm not letting her get away with this. The crowd's mood shifted again from shock to righteous anger. Despite Marcus's warnings, the pursuit was on. If there was anything more pathetic than Patricia pouring acid into the pool, it was her trying to run away after being caught red-handed. The scene was almost comical. Hair disheveled, flip-flops hitting the floor as she shot off towards her own house as if she could just hide and wait for it all to blow over. But my goodness, this wasn't a little HOA game. It was a crime. The residents looked at each other for a second, and then, as if in rehearsal, went after her. Yes, the entire condominium ran out in pursuit of the pool tyrant. The janitor, who was clearly relishing the opportunity to take part in a revolution, was the first to shoot after her, followed by at least a dozen furious neighbors. The children, still trying to understand what was going on, joined in and started running too, laughing as if it were a game of catch. Patricia ran down the sidewalk, dodging baby carriages, meticulously trimmed lawns, and dogs that barked excitedly as if they too wanted to join in the chase. Her beige sweatshirt fluttered in the wind as she tried to reach her house, but there was no way. She had barely set foot on the balcony when the inevitable happened. The police siren echoed through the condominium. 2 police cars turned the corner, their lights flashing in intense blue and red. The neighbors stopped running, making way for the officers who got out of the vehicles with expressions that made it clear that they had had enough before they even understood the whole story. Patricia froze in her doorway. For the first time, her face was completely pale. Good afternoon, ma'am, said one of the policemen with that calm that only a professional used to dealing with clueless people has. We received a report of vandalism and the use of dangerous substances in a communal area. Can we talk? She swallowed. She tried to smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched as if her brain had short-circuited. This is a mistake, she began, raising a shrill tone of voice that no longer convinced anyone. I'm the president of the HOA. I take care of this place. The policeman raised an eyebrow. And we have a security recording showing you pouring a chemical into the pool, causing reactions that injured at least one person. Marcus stepped forward, Lisa Rodriguez at his side. Officers, I've submitted video evidence to your department digitally. I also have a preliminary chemical analysis of the pool water showing dangerous levels of hydrochloric acid. Lisa nodded. As a retired EPA hazardous materials specialist, I can confirm this pool now qualifies as a chemical hazard site requiring professional remediation. If Patricia still thought she could get out of this, that was the moment it hit her. She tried to argue. She tried to say that it wasn't like that it was just a more intense form of sanitization. She tried to say that it was all a misunderstanding, that the cameras weren't showing the context. But my dear, what context justifies pouring acid into a communal swimming pool? As she sank into her own excuses, the policemen remained calm. They'd heard it all before, but it was clear that even they weren't prepared for this woman's level of insanity. In the middle of her outburst, one of the policemen just raised his hand and said, "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind you." The silence that followed was so profound that you could hear the birds singing in the distance. What? She blinked as if she hadn't quite understood. You're being arrested for vandalism, misuse of dangerous substances, and endangering the health of others. If you want, you can explain this better to the judge. From the back of the crowd, a surprising voice spoke up. Wait, it was Dr. Henry Wilson, the community's most respected resident, a retired psychologist who rarely involved himself in HOA disputes. The officers paused as Dr. Wilson made his way forward. Officers, I've been Patricia's therapist for the past year. She suffers from obsessive-compulsive disorder with paranoid features. She's been under tremendous stress since her granddaughter nearly drowned in a pool accident 2 years ago. A murmur ran through the crowd. This was news to everyone. While that doesn't excuse her actions, Dr. Wilson continued, I believe she requires psychiatric evaluation before criminal proceedings. The revelation created an immediate division among the residents. Some nodded sympathetically, while others protested loudly. Mental health isn't an excuse to poison children, shouted one parent. But if she's sick, she needs help, not jail, countered an elderly resident. The debate spread through the gathered crowd like wildfire. It was as if someone had pulled the rug out from under Patricia. She tried to resist. She took 2 steps backwards, tripped over her own balcony, and fell sitting on the step. What followed was an Emmy-worthy spectacle. Fake tears, cries of injustice, pleas for help from neighbors who minutes before had been fleeing her toxic pool. No one was moved. Quite the opposite. One of the neighbors who had clearly hated this woman for a long time took out his cell phone and started filming. So, Patty, how does it feel to be caught by the very security camera you installed yourself? The children laughed. Some of the neighbors applauded quietly. Even the janitor, that hardworking man who had already swept up so much dirt that he didn't deserve to be dealing with this kind of problem, smiled in a corner as he watched her being handcuffed. She was put in the back of the car, still moaning, still shouting about, I'm the victim here. But nobody cared anymore. Her empire had fallen. The officers were preparing to leave when Marcus approached them. There's something else you should know, he said quietly. I believe this incident may be connected to other accidents that have happened in our community. The officer looked at him sharply. What kind of accidents? 3 months ago, the playground equipment was found coated with an industrial adhesive. Before that, someone tampered with the sprinkler system to spray a caustic cleaning solution. At the time, we couldn't prove who was responsible. The officer's expression darkened. We'll need statements from everyone affected. This investigation just got a lot bigger. Over the next few days, the condominium was filled with gossip. Every corner had a group of neighbors talking about Patricia's arrest, speculating on how long she would be out, trying to guess whether she would return or disappear for good. Most importantly, the HOA was without a president. The association's board had to act fast. They held an emergency meeting to discuss the future of the condominium, and it was at that moment that a revolutionary idea emerged. What if we abolished the HOA? The entire condo practically erupted in ecstasy at this possibility. No more stupid rules. No more ridiculous fines. No more sweatshirt dictatorships. Marcus stood to address the packed meeting room. Before we vote on dissolving the HOA entirely, I'd like to propose an alternative. What if, instead of no governance, we created a more democratic system? Rotating leadership, transparent rules, decisions made by majority vote rather than dictatorial decree. A heated debate followed. Some residents, traumatized by Patricia's reign, wanted no rules at all. Others recognized the need for some basic structure. What about the pool? Someone asked. Without rules, how do we keep it safe and clean? We create reasonable guidelines, Marcus suggested. Not 32 pages of regulations, but common sense expectations that we all help enforce. Lisa Rodriguez stood up. I propose we form a community council instead of an HOA. No fines, just community solutions to community problems. Dr. Wilson added his perspective. What happened with Patricia should teach us something about power. It corrupts, yes, but it also attracts those who shouldn't wield it. Any new system we create needs checks and balances. An official vote was taken. The result? The HOA was dissolved, replaced by a voluntary community association with rotating leadership positions, transparent finances, and a simplified code of conduct that fit on a single page. As for Patricia, she was eventually diagnosed with several mental health conditions and sentenced to community service and mandatory psychiatric treatment rather than jail time. The condominium decided not to pursue civil damages on the condition that she sell her property and never return. The acid pool incident became local legend, a cautionary tale about power gone mad. But it also became the catalyst for something unexpected, a stronger, more united community where neighbors actually looked out for each other rather than policing one another. The new pool rules? Just 3 simple guidelines. 1. Be safe. 2. Be respectful. 3. Have fun. And nobody ever complained about them again. If you like this true story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like.